This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Baku saw arguably the worst of the porpoising issues that we've seen so far in 2022. But whilst in other races the drivers that really complained about any discomfort were drivers whose cars have been heavily affected by the bouncing, in Baku, due to the high-speed nature of the track and also the bumpy road surface, pretty much all drivers experienced the bouncing to some extent. And it was very telling that even someone like Daniel Ricciardo, who in the McLaren has been one of the least affected by the bouncing, actually came out and said that he now understands the concerns that other drivers have had.
Because I said to you yesterday, the other teams seem to think you don't have any porpoising and they're really suffering.
Today we did, yeah. Like just certainly I don't know if wind or something changed, but it got worse and worse. And I sympathise with everyone that's had it now because it's bad. Like, I genuinely feel rattled. I'm more probably sugared because it's the first time I've truly felt probably what some others feel. So yeah, I know watching the onboards, it looks bad, especially, Mercedes and that sometimes. So yeah, so I now feel what they feel, I believe, because it definitely felt bad.
This is not the first time that drivers have talked about what effect the bouncing might have on their health, with Carlos Sainz also recently saying, "I think we need to, as drivers and Formula 1, consider how much of a toll a driver should be paying for his back and his health in a Formula 1 career with this kind of car philosophy." For me, it's more of a philosophy question that I put out there maybe for Formula 1 and everyone to rethink about how much the drivers need to actually pay a price in his career with his health in order to combat this. It's probably a question that I think as drivers, we don't like talking much because we don't like sounding weak. It's also important to clarify that the drivers are heavily emphasizing the long-term effects of what the bouncing might do. It's not necessarily that it's impossible to deal with over a single race distance, but this regulation period is going to run until 2026, and the long-term effects of that to your spine, brain, or any other part of your nervous system, that's what the drivers are really worried about. And that's not even mentioning the potential safety concerns during the race. Loads of drivers have talked about how it's difficult to actually spot your braking point, how the bouncing will actually reduce your reaction times if there's an incident that you have to avoid in front of you, and even simpler stuff like Fernando Alonso at the end of the race couldn't even see the checkered flag because he was bouncing so much. The problem with the bouncing is that it's a direct result of the teams trying to chase performance. And that argument between performance and safety is literally an argument older than F1 itself. However, whilst safety in F1 is a difficult issue to solve, safety on the internet is a much easier one, and even though Surfshark might not be able to solve porpoising, it can solve some of your online frustrations. Surfshark is a virtual private network that allows you to be fully protected on the internet by changing your internet IP and hiding your location. There are countless benefits that Surfshark provide, like protecting your data, blocking ads whilst you're browsing, and also allowing you to access content that might not be available in your country. So for example, during F1 preseason testing, I was out in Bahrain, and whilst I was out there, I wanted to catch up with all of the Premier League games on the Sky Sports channel. But because they don't have the broadcast rights to show the highlights outside of the UK, those videos just weren't there. No problem, however, because with Surfshark, in only a few clicks you can connect to a server in the UK, refresh the page, and now I can watch all of the videos that weren't available. That's just one of many benefits, and by using my promo code ALDAS, or by clicking the link at the very top of the description, you can save 83% off with an extra 3 months on top of that, and also for this month only with Surfshark, get antivirus for free as well. Surfshark also has a 30-day money-back guarantee if you change your mind. It's a great deal, so make sure to go check them out if you're curious, and thank you again to Surfshark. Everything that the drivers have said about the long-term health concerns that they have is completely true, but where the difficulty lies is that both porpoising and bouncing is a direct result of the teams chasing performance with these new generation of ground effect cars. And that's an important distinction to make because it's not just the porpoising that's making these cars bounce so much. Porpoising is a ground effect phenomenon whereby when the floor touches the ground at high speed, it basically traps the air from being channeled under the car, stalling the airflow, and this causes the bouncing motion. But as George Russell pointed out, what's also happening is that even if you're not porpoising, some teams are running these cars so close to the ground, literally millimeters in some cases, that a naturally bumpy road is going to cause the car to bounce regardless. Those are two different things, but they're happening because the teams are choosing to run the cars so low. The conundrum with this bouncing is that although there will always be a little bit of bouncing because that's just what you get with ground effect cars, no one is forcing the teams to run their cars so low that the bouncing becomes painful for the drivers. Even just taking the top 3 teams in Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes, each of these teams and each of their individual drivers all have motives for wanting the bouncing to stop, and whilst mainly it is for safety, you can't ignore the fact that within those motives, there is also a performance benefit or loss, which undoubtedly will make some teams slower and some teams quicker. There are teams on the grid which generally suffer less from bouncing because their car produces an efficient amount of downforce at a ride height where the bouncing just isn't as extreme for the driver. Now, this changes massively depending on the track layout, the track surface, and of course the setup that the teams run as well. But as a very rough example, the teams that have suffered less with bouncing and porpoising have been Red Bull, McLaren and Alfa Romeo, whilst the teams which seem to suffer more have been Mercedes, Ferrari and AlphaTauri. Lando Norris even said after the race that McLaren are consciously running with their car at a raised ride height because they don't want their car to porpoise. They believe the performance gains of running their car lower to the ground is not worth the time and speed that is lost through the bouncing. Everyone on the grid, especially in Baku, was bouncing to an extent, but a bumpy high-speed track, especially a street track at that, just amplifies the issues, and that's why we saw that especially with Lewis, with how bad the Mercedes bounces and with the experiments that they're running on his car, you could hear over his team radio both the discomfort that he was going through and also audibly the car hitting the ground as he was going along. The FIA is open to potential changes to the rules that would reduce the bouncing, but for something to be implemented for next season, 8 out of the 10 teams have to vote in favour for there to be a change. But if your team, and more specifically your car, is not affected as much by the bouncing because you don't need to run it at such a critical ride height compared to the other teams, then why should you agree to change if the car you designed works best to the specification of the rules that all of the teams had? This is actually something that happened fairly recently with the FIA proposing a change, but not enough teams agreeing yet. It doesn't necessarily mean, however, that even the drivers within these teams are completely happy. Even Max Verstappen has talked about doing something for the long term, but he's not been as vocal, and rightly so, because the bouncing on the Red Bull has been pretty manageable as they've built arguably the best all-round car in 2022. The FIA have a difficult decision to make because in my opinion, they have to find a way to stop the teams from themselves for the benefit of all of the drivers. Yes, the teams can easily mitigate the bouncing by just raising the car, but no team on the grid will massively compromise their package and leave performance on the table that is right there. Motorsport is kind of unique in that sense. Not a single driver would rather drive a comfortable car over a fast one. But this is where the FIA, who don't have a horse in the race, have to find some kind of solution that saves the teams from themselves. Pierre Gasly, after the race, summarized it better than I ever could by saying, "It's not healthy, that's for sure. I've had a physio session before and after every session just because my spinal discs are suffering from it. You have literally no suspension, it just hits you going through your spine. The team is asking me, okay, we can compromise the setup, and I'm compromising my health for the performance, and I'll always do it because I am a driver and I will always go for the fastest car I can. But I don't think the FIA should put us in a corner where you got to deal between health and performance." My personal opinion is that what we saw happen to Lewis specifically cannot become the norm in Formula 1. Of course, there's always going to be some kind of pain associated with racing and driving stiff race cars, but that bouncing and the genuine effects it's already having on the drivers, that cannot become normal. As a fan of Formula 1, there's nothing exciting to me in seeing drivers get potentially long-term nerve damage from just driving in F1. But I also don't want to see teams like Red Bull have performance taken away from them, or too much performance be given to other teams. Somewhere there is going to have to be a compromise, and someone is going to have to lose out regardless. The teams which have designed better cars, they don't deserve to have their advantage taken away from them, but this is nothing new in F1. The barge board changes in 2021 had a similar negative effect on Mercedes, but that was a performance change designed to close the field, whilst the porpoising is driven more by driver safety, although inadvertently, there is no doubt that it will also have performance implications as well. That's the complicated web that the FIA will have to try and untangle, and undoubtedly, we're only getting started in terms of what the end goal will actually be. Well, there you have it, another video in the bag. As always, don't forget to let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. And once again, a big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. As always, don't forget to check out all of their links at the very top of the description and use my code AUDAS for 83% off with an extra 3 months, and also for this month only, antivirus for free as well. And once again, a big thank you to Surfshark. Anyway, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.